Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Found It, Fetched It. I hope you all enjoyed our extra special episodes last week where we were dealing on supercar on a shoestring. This week Claire and I are going to be talking all about when ideology gets in the way of training the dog in front of you. How are you today, Claire?
Good morning, Joe. I'm very well, thank you. And the sun is shining today, which is a blessing at the moment because I feel like we've just had rain and rain for what feels like forever.
For months and months it has just poured down on the South Wales valleys. It's hard to hear it's been the same for you because normally up your area in Kent you have better weather than us.
Yeah, no, not this time.
Okay, last week we talked to thousands of people doing our free event, which we absolutely loved. And obviously, they talked to us about what they're personally going through with their dogs at home, why they're on the call to begin with. So, we wanted to talk about today this idea of when ideology is getting in the way of training the dog in front of you, because we saw loads of it, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We saw loads of it. And I think the phrase train the dog in front of you is being used very openly, very casually at the moment. But the truth of it is, to genuinely train the dog in front of you, you have to remove barriers and be prepared to do what works for that dog and handler in that moment and work with them to move forward. And I feel like so often this isn't actually what's happening because people are getting hung up on they've been told this, they've been told that, and we can't do this and we can't do that. And I know we're going to go quite deep into it, but I think it's such an important topic to talk about.
When we say ideology, we're talking about what I see so much through lots of different groups, but so much in dog training, is these like fixed beliefs about the right way to train. In gun dog training, there are so many of them on there.
Yes, there are. And you get it from very extremes on both ends of the spectrum of trainers who are still stuck in the dark ages of punishing a dog and dominating a dog to get an end result, and to people that believe that dogs should have ultimate choice in everything that they do and that you can't say no to the dog, and then everything in between of that. And I think this is where it gets so complicated for a handler, especially a new or novice handler who also has a dynamic, drivey, pacey breed of dog. And then they're like, how on earth do I communicate with this dog effectively if I can't say yes and I can't say no? Or at the other end of the spectrum, if they feel like the only way to achieve things is to bully the dog into it. And it's just gone nuts.
This week on one of our Facebook posts, somebody wrote, "Are you force free?" And I went back and I said, we never say we're force free because it can range from somebody saying, I don't put a lead on my dog, to somebody saying, I ask for consent for grooming. It's so broad. I said, so we don't use it, but what we will say is we do not believe in any harsh or abusive training. And I sort of dealt with that. And then another trainer came in and said, yeah, but it's subjective, what's harsh and abusive? And I said, and you're proving my point exactly. If we try to put a label on it, which we specifically don't do on purpose within the LWDG, if we try to put a label, the label gets smashed. So in some ways, for somebody who is new, just like you said, they walk in and it's like they've walked into an argument in a party.
Yeah, 100%. And this is exactly it. And it's going on across the entire industry at the moment. And it's so stressful and it's so tiring to watch and see. And it's completely right. It is subjective, but there are so many factors around that we have to consider the time in which this problem needs to be resolved, because maybe there's a massive safety element. Maybe the dog has been reported for behaviour which is deemed dangerous. The health and well-being of the dog, is the behaviour the dog is displaying potentially causing issues that are negative on it and on its handler as well. Some people might be completely happy to spend a year training the dog how to walk nicely on a loose lead or teaching the dog recall. But for other people who don't have access to secure areas or who don't have anywhere private to exercise and train their dog, they need to get things done quickly. When we look at it, for me, abusive means anything that is physically harming the dog and mentally harming the dog with long-term negative effects from that. Because sometimes we might have to say no to the dog in a firm but fair way, and the dog might not like it in the moment, but they get over it in 2 seconds and they've learned the lesson. So I think this is where we have to just have these conversations and be so honest with ourselves and also with handlers about what it means to really train a dog.
Yeah, because Arthur's a year this week, and if I recalled him and he didn't listen, and we're in a secure field, my response is going to be very different if Arthur's legging it across the field after a sheep. My
Mm.
my screaming at him is going to be different for his own safety. I think what's happening is they're not thinking about, like you just said, the situation they're in. Like, very rare that I would need to, I see, lose it with my dog. But like you said, if he's about to run in front of a lorry, of course I'm going to shout. Of course I'm going to sound like I'm having a nervous breakdown with him because I'm trying to save his life. That is not the point for me to be like, oh my God, I have got time to think about this now because I don't. That's like we go into an extreme there. But when we talk about ideologies of saying, I must always be, I don't even think we can use the sentence with the dog, I must always be anything.
No, 100%. Training a dog is very fluid. It very much flows. It ebbs and flows. And I can go weeks and weeks training my own dogs, which would probably look purely positive or force free. And then, but because I've taught my dog throughout her life to be respectful of when I do say no, and that might come in the form of saying leave or come when I know you don't want to come, but it's not an option. I know that I can appropriately correct my dog in that moment. And because of the way I have educated her and brought her up, I can do that without any fear of there being any negative fallout from that. I know that I can correct my dog appropriately and she will learn from that, and our relationship will be fulfilled because she understands this isn't personal. I asked you to do something and it's not negotiable. And I think the other point is so much now we talk about building resilience in the dogs and making dogs strong personalities that can deal with life and reduce anxiety. And when you look at anxiety, that can come from separation anxiety, it could be sound phobias. There are so many things. If we're wrapping our dogs in cotton wool, letting them make choices all the time, and we're not teaching them how to cope, we're going to see a lot more anxiety, a lot more fearful behaviours, a lot more inappropriate behaviours, and untrained dogs. That is a fact of life for sure.
Yeah, and the long-term consequences of this, as much as we don't like to think of happening, is it's going to end up with us, definitely within the UK, it probably is like this in other countries already. We're going to need dog licenses, we're going to need dog courses, and all because we are not, like you said, training the dog in front of us, but knowing what that means. And this is, I suppose, where I get frustrated. Train the dog in front of you has become, like you just said, this like all covering, embracing thing. It's absolutely, it's not. It's literally the dog in front of you. Like it's you can't just say it like it's almost like a Nike just do it. It's like it's become like a marketing slogan when it was never ever intended that, was it? It was like, what does your dog in front of you need to do or learn in order to be a part of society?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you hang on to that and then add into that, that people are misusing words. So they are believing that if we say punish a dog, we mean beat a dog, or correct a dog means yank a dog, or whatever, however you look at it. People are now actually becoming afraid to even say words that don't mean anything bad. It's how you're interpreting it. And so everyone's like treading on eggshells. I can't say this, I can't say that, I can't do this, and I can't do that. And we've got dogs in the meantime that are suffering with anxiety, are frustrated, are out of control, dangerously out of control, some of them. People with dogs living on a long line for the rest of their life because they don't know what else to do. And yes, sometimes I'm working with a dog and I'll have a conversation with an owner and I'm like, there are 3 or 4 ways that we could tackle this. And this way, if we do it this way, this could take quite a long time. There's going to be a lot of management in place. This way will be much quicker. So, what are you happy with? I will always have that conversation with a client. What are your goals? What is your time frame? And what are you comfortable with? And then I will give them the options and work with that owner. But it's very difficult for me if I'm working with an owner who has been fed a lot of misinformation, and I know that we can fix this dog really quickly without any abuse, without any harsh handling. Yet they're sitting there thinking, yeah, but I don't want to say no to my dog because I've been told that will damage the relationship. But what I see is more damage in that relationship because there's not trust, there's not cooperation, and there's no clarity for the dog. And when you haven't got those things, you've got a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and people probably listening to this think, oh, they bang on about this, but we can't ever lose sight of this. People with 20-week-old puppies, having them put to sleep because they don't listen, is for the love of sweet life. The dog is 5 months old. How much did you expect it to listen? Again, I keep on going back to Arthur. He's a year old. I must tell that dog, excuse my language, he's a knob at least once a day. You're such a knob. And like, I'm not even correcting him with that. At that point, I'm just vocalizing my own frustration
Yeah,
while he's done something yet again. And it's not even at that point about me trying to train him. I'm just like, I'm letting it out. But he does it every day. Like he's still learning some of the same things. Like he doesn't really understand. Like certain things, like he's still grasping while one thing is fine to hold and one thing isn't. There's loads of things he won't pick up, but every now and then he's, oh, I've never met this item before, and he'll pick it up and he's like, am I allowed to pick up this item? Because I don't know the rule around this item yet. And I'm like, knob, give it back.
yeah,
You know? But and I train him probably because he's a big dog and he looks older than he is. I'm probably sweeter on him than I've ever been on any dog because I also know that everything with him comes with the purest heart. But in order for me to train the dog in front of him, because he's so big and so not dull, he's not dull, he's super bright, but because he's so into everything, I have to constantly be reinforcing boundaries and being like, no, because that's the only way he's working out. Like I just said, am I allowed this? No. Oh, okay. Am I allowed this? No. Like it's like an ongoing conversation, and it is that with our dogs, isn't it? Train the
yeah.
dog in front of you is ongoing conversation where you teach a young baby what is okay.
Yeah, it you have to teach, and that's the thing. Where there becomes so much confusion for the dog is when there isn't that clarity, there isn't that education. And I say to people, if you've got a dog who loves to possess and parade with an item in their mouth, they just love that. We have to teach them that there are certain times and certain items that is not a behavior that's acceptable. So we might have to correct that and say, no, this isn't what you can do in this moment. But that doesn't mean that's all we're doing. What we're also doing is saying to the dog, this is the behavior I want you to show me when you have these things in your mouth. This is what the deal is. This is the rules of the game. And then alongside that, we might decide that actually, because that dog enjoys possessing and parading so much, we need to give them an outlet for that behavior with something that is appropriate to do that with, which is something we've done with one of our own dogs, Jeannie, because where she was diagnosed with elbow dysplasia, had 7 months out of training from a very young age. She was under a year of age. And once she was allowed to run, running became life. And she loves to run in big circles, but I can't have her doing that on a retrieve, not a formal retrieve. So she has a very specific toy, it's a tuggy toy, that and a very specific command or cue, whatever you want to call that, which is wahoo. And when she hears the word wahoo, and is given that toy, she is allowed to run and parade and possess and have that toy. But dummies or any other articles that she is formally sent to retrieve, that behaviour isn't on the table. And she now is understanding that. And so we're seeing consistency in her training, understanding, an ability to give her more freedom because we've shown her when and where and with what that behaviour that she wants to display is acceptable. And so it's not about flattening the dog, and it's not about saying to the dog, you can never have fun, but it's about teaching them safely when it's appropriate to do those things.
And I think, like, when we look at, you mentioned long lines there, we've got an amazing training on how to use a long line correctly. And people who watch that say to me, I never understood that's how that long line was used. Because people see a long line and basically see long lead, and it's
Yes,
not a long lead. And also, when people say to me, I put it on the long line because that's kinder than a lead by the side of me, because they can do all the things they want to do, like sniff percents, etc. And I'm like, it's again, it's not the person's error. They don't know what they don't know. But if a dog can smell one drop of blood in a swimming pool, whether you let him walk off the path and put his head in the hedge or not, he knows what's there. He's already scented whatever scent is in that hedge.
yes, 100%. That's exactly it. And it is crazy. And I have this conversation with people a lot when they believe that scatter feeding in the garden or scatter feeding in the lounge is giving them fulfillment for their hunting and sniffing skills. And it's no, this not the same. This is not the same. And you need to teach the dog and train the dog and use its natural abilities for sure. But let's not be fooled. Dogs are not silly. And like you just said about them being on a long line, if they're walking next to you or 5 foot or 10 foot in front of you, their nose is working in exactly the same way, exactly the same way. And I see this a lot, what you've just said about the long lines. I see this an awful lot. People are so dependent on it, but they're not using it in a way to teach the dog, educate the dog, and get them off of that long line. I see dogs that have been on long lines, they're 3, 4, 5 years of age. They're still reliant on a long line because that training hasn't been done. And long lines are dangerous and frustrating in a lot of circumstances, in my opinion. And granted, if you haven't got somewhere secure to take your dog and you're teaching recall, absolutely use a long line, but use it appropriately and use it as a training aid, not like you described as a long lead hanging on to the end of it. When people say their dog is running to the end of the long line and then choking themselves on it, that dog is not working within the boundaries of those long lines. And we, as you said, we do have an amazing masterclass all about it. But yeah, and it's a massive problem. It is a massive problem. And it's this skewed idea in the owners and handlers' heads of what freedom is to a dog and how to provide it. It's such a skewed idea.
Yeah, because your dog is fulfilling its need as long as, I think, and this is my personal opinion, you're giving them exercise and allowing them to be mentally stimulated by the environment they're walking through. And you're doing things like, for me, it seems to me that my dogs love to hunt, to find, not to hunt. They hunt to find. So we've been putting together some new success paths for our members, and we've put hunting and in brackets, search and find, because that's what we mean by hunting, isn't it? It's like, it's not just sniffle, sniffle like that. Of course, that does something, but the dog's genetic love for that is to find a meal at the end of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's a case of the ideologies, like they're so far ranging? If I look at a gun dog, traditional, old school, you must not ever repeat yourself to the dog, like ever. Not even like when it's training. And this
Yeah.
is where I think ideologies get lost. You probably shouldn't be repeating yourself to a 3-year-old that knows what it's doing, but a little puppy where you're saying words over and over to get them to get a cue and a word together to get that connection, you probably say it quite a lot.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and you are right. There's so many things if you look at it down that scale. So yeah, you've got the not repeating a command. It's remember what's missed out of that sentence is actually you've got to lure or manipulate the dog into doing the thing and then pair it with the word to get the connection going. They're not saying that, they're just saying stop repeating the word. Okay, so then how do you teach it? It's like saying don't use food in your training. Food can be used appropriately and food can be used inappropriately. Yes, with some dogs, holding a piece of food will get them to spit the retrieve. With other dogs, you can teach a fabulous hold using food. And all of these things are just like cut off statements rather than saying, let's have a look at your dog and let's see what we need to do to help you train your dog successfully based on what your dog deems rewarding and how to appropriately correct your dog when he goes off the rails, he or she goes off the rails. And this just isn't, it's just these blanket statements on either side of it if you go to the extremes, they're just blanket statements where people are just going, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I have to do this, can't use that, and I can't show the dog that. And it's just, yeah, this is crazy. How on earth are people supposed to navigate this? Which is what we're trying to help people do, navigate this.
Yeah, but like sometimes, like saying, right, let's use learning to drive a car. I know I can do 70 miles an hour on the motorway. The rule is you can do 70 miles an hour on the motorway. You don't do 70 miles an hour if there is an accident in front of you and you're going to run straight in the back of it. So
No.
as humans, we go, the rule, obviously, the logical rule here, and I think it is logical, is I can do 70 miles an hour whilst the road conditions allow me to do so.
Uh-huh.
And it's that second line that makes the first line appropriate. With
Yeah.
dogs, we are taking the first line and not putting in the second line. So using something like food or toys are cheating,
Yeah.
unless you are at the stage when the dog needs that to learn the cue. Like, it's the please people, I need you to put the two things, and it's not just I need, like I'm everything. It's like the whole community of people who've just bought dogs need you to put the two pieces together and stop making these like ideologies so strict that they keep on thinking they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, with so many things, the answer will be it depends. Which I know sounds really elusive. And it isn't supposed to be elusive in the slightest. But an example. So somebody might talk about recall and they're trying to teach recall and they want to get the dog off of the long line. And they say, how do I reward my dog for the recall? And I will say, it depends. What does your dog find motivating? Not what do you find motivating. So the owner would be like, oh, he loves chicken or he loves cheese. And I'm like, does he really though? Or what would he prefer? And it's looking at, does the dog value food enough for it to be motivating as a reward for a recall, or do they prefer play? Would they prefer to run and grab a toy and play with that instead of chase the squirrel? So we have to look at what motivates the dog because we absolutely know that behaviours we want repeated, we need to reward them, but we need to reward them effectively in a way that dog deems rewarding, not how we think it's rewarding, but how the dog deems it rewarding. And it's the same with correcting a dog appropriately. What is an appropriate correction for one dog may not be an appropriate correction for another dog. How do we know? Results. Results tell us. So if somebody's been using the same correction for the last year to correct a behavior, the dog hasn't been corrected. They haven't learnt that that's no longer on the table. And so you're not correcting the dog, you're at best probably just nagging the dog into not doing it rather than correcting that behavior and teaching them a new appropriate behavior. So we have to look at how long's the behavior been going on? What were the appropriate corrections or interruptions that were used? Were they effective or not? How did we reward the dog when they did get it right? Is that appropriate? Does it build more of that behavior? Or are we just like giving the dog food for the sake of giving the dog food? All these things have to be considered with every dog individually.
Yeah, because like when we say like in the group, say you want to see it through. Again, say you want to see it through is once the dog knows it. Don't be having like a party. I always say like a raver, blowing the whistle, shouting the name, shouting 17 different cues. Don't do that. You're confusing the dog. But
Yeah.
like you have to understand, and this I think is where perhaps the industry needs to focus. a dog's awareness with how a dog learns. Like, I don't mean like you need to go into a university degree in it, but we should all rather be talking about this is wrong, this is right, this is everything, this is nothing. It's like, this is how your dog learns, or a dog learns. Now, how does this apply to your dog? Because, like you
Mhm.
said, we know there are millions and millions of spaniels who will not take food and training. And then we know those dogs would love, without doubt, to chase a tennis ball after doing something right. We have to work with the dog in front of us to be like, who are you as a dog? And I don't want to make it like again sound even more complicated if somebody new is on there. But like, for example, if Matt said to me, go out the kitchen, there's some chicken, you can have it if you put your clothes away. Not that my husband would say that, but
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah,
like, yeah, keep your chicken. But if he was like, yeah, there's dark chocolate out there, like I've been to Thornton's, if you tidy up this room, you can go and have them. That room would be clean in about 2 seconds because, like, yum, that's mine. And we know as people that we need different motivators. We need to then take that to the dog. So, like, when we say to people, like you just said, it depends, it really does depend on getting to know your dog.
yeah. It does. It's the dog, the behavior, how long the behavior's been happening, any background underneath that behavior, the handler, their ability, their confidence levels, that handler's expectations, their timelines that they've got to work within. All of those things count when putting together a training plan for a dog. All of those things count and have to be considered. So it isn't one size fits all, and it isn't you can do this and you can't do this. But equally, I think one of my frustrations is when I know that a dog it just doesn't have clarity and the owner doesn't want to do what will give that dog clarity, and it could be done in a couple of minutes, done and dusted, never to be repeated, but they've been drilled through misinformation that you can't say no to your dog. And it's like, if you just say no to your dog for this is going to go away very quickly. And it's not always that simple. Of course, it's not. But so very often it is as well. And I think we just have to be really realistic and have these conversations so that owners go, okay, so it's not just like this. Okay, so how do I find out more about how to train my dog? How do I understand the dog in front of me? And that's the key. But if trainers aren't doing that, how on earth can handlers?
For owners who are like, okay, this does clear the waters, but the waters are still very muddy, I always try as much as I can to take it back to us growing up. Like my mum, when she said no, sometimes I didn't even know. I hadn't even turned around to work out what the no was about, but I knew something needed me to correct myself. Like I would look at her
Yeah,
and she'd be like, no, you mustn't do that. No, you mustn't take off your brother, or no, whatever it was. And I knew the word no meant I need to change something I'm doing. Really clear. And then like Charlotte, my daughter, as the world knows now, is having a baby and she's now being like overwhelmed with all these things, which is apparently right parenting and wrong parenting. And that's just a bigger minefield as dog training. And I'm
yeah,
like, you just teach them yes and no because I didn't know what no meant other than something needs to change as a young person. If my mother had sat there and had a 5 hour conversation about the rules of, I don't know, sharing with my brother, I probably would have lost attention in about 3 seconds. But I did know that she just wanted me to change something. So if we look at that and then take that to a dog, so go, we teach the dog or no. You can even turn teach the dog, as we know, pennies from heaven if that's what you want your cue to be. But like whatever it is, it doesn't matter what you say. That word just means let's look at what you're doing and change something.
exactly. Exactly that. Exactly. So how can that be wrong? How can that be wrong? So when they're saying you can't say no to your dog, they're not saying that at all. It's just the way they're saying it. But that isn't what they mean. Or if they do mean it, then they really have got something going quite wrong. I don't know how to say that more politely.
I think if we look in gun dog training, the reward only versus no reward is like a fight. We see
Yeah,
then the like we see this, I think, more from America than we do here. Like America will teach a force fetch or a force hold, and the UK will be like, we will not teach those. And then we see the e-collar camps of you are e-collar or you aren't e-collar. There are so many of them within gun dog training. There are additional layers along with what you learn in normal dog training. What I'm trying to say about that is a person who just went and bought a spaniel puppy and didn't realize they had a crazy little predator on the lead, right? The first influence they have is dog training because they didn't know they bought a gun dog specifically. So
Mhm.
that word confuses them, the general dog training. But then at some point, something clicks and they go, oh, I know what's wrong with my dog. I have got a gun dog. Now I need to look for gun dog training. So they narrow it off and then they walk out of that one party with an argument into another party with yet another argument. I honestly, I feel for them. I really do. And I know I've been on that journey. I was lucky enough to find all of you guys who, and to be fair to you, Claire, let's be honest about this. I probably went through all these camps. I can remember being like, I think positive only is the only way forward, Claire. And you like smiling and going, yeah, okay, have you thought about that? Or have you thought about that? You never ever know you are wrong, Joanne. Because I was going on this journey through, even though I was the founder of the LWDG, I was still learning to train a dog. I still am. But I was going through this and you were really patient with me and you were like, what about this or what about that? Had I found somebody, oh, touch, I wish he was, but had my father still been alive, he would have said to me, make this expletive, stop that effing shit, and you're going to do it this way. And I would have probably not been as in love with gun dog training as I am now because I would have got so upset with the rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute perfect sense. And you're so right in everything you just said. And it just reminded me of something that I haven't told you yet. So, a couple of weeks ago, literally a couple of weeks ago, on my FDS page, I posted a little video of 4 students in my beginner gun dog group. 2 had spaniels and 2 had retriever breeds. Okay. And they were doing a little sit stay, and all it was, they'd worked so hard. They're only a beginner group and they've done all the work to get a nice solid sit stay. They've built in duration, they've built in distance, they're starting to build in distractions now. And it was their first attempt at leaving all 4 young dogs. These are all dogs that are like under a year or a year. All 4 of them, leaving them in a sit, in a line, and they walked away proudly from their dogs with their back to the dog. And the dogs weren't reliant on eye contact, any physical pressure, verbal reminders. They walked away probably about 10, 15 paces, turned, walked back to their dogs, and rewarded them. You could have knocked me down with a feather, literally, because this video kind of went a bit viral. I think viral's like technical word that you use for this, and it was being shared and it was momentum growing on this little video of a sit stay. And then all the controversy started over this little sit stay video. And it started with somebody saying, I was always told never turn your back on a dog. And somebody else saying, you don't want dogs to sit, you want them to stand and point. And all these other like ridiculous phrases that were getting said. Anyway, what I realised after trying to explain the amount of effort that had gone into teaching these 2 spaniels and these 2 Labradors to keep their bums on the floor and not rely on constant nagging from their handler, eye contact, or physical pressure, it suddenly dawned on me when I did a little bit of research that these trainers weren't all from the UK. These people that were commenting were not all from the UK, and they do things very differently there. And I was like, wow. But what got me the most was this was a beautiful little video that those handlers were so proud of that moment. And I was so proud of those little young dogs and these handlers, whom I believe none of them have trained a gun dog properly from start to finish before. I believe. I'm just racking my brain. So I'm sorry if anyone of them is listening and it's your second one that you've done. But anyway, they were so proud. And I was like, they didn't need that. But that is how damaging opinions can be and social media can be when people don't understand the context of what's being taught and why it was being taught. This was a massive deal for these dogs in their journeys for what they're going to be doing later on. But just because these people were from a different country, they have different opinion on how you would do that. But I would never jump on their page and be like, I don't do a forced fetch, so why are you? Like, I don't think that's appropriate to do that, even if it's something I don't do or agree with. I'm not going to like challenge people on their own page. But anyway, it just backed up what you just said completely.
Yeah, but that I think as well, like you think about it, right? I was probably like we're 10 years this year, and I look back and sometimes I think, Jesus Christ, Joe, you're a bit bolshy there. But we used to say to people, if you can't be kind, we'd put up a picture of the door and be like, if you can't be kind, use the door. And like we were really, and we still are that strong. I'm not putting pictures of doors up anymore. I say, could you just be a bit kinder, please? But we were that. And that's, I think, what made our conversation able to happen, in the fact that people say stuff and they're not attacked for it. They might be educated around it. Have you looked at this? Or, and I suppose we're lucky in the fact that we've got a whole library of training where we don't actually even correct in a comment now. We just say, why don't you go watch this video? And let the video explain what we're trying to explain. Far easier in 20 minutes to explain something to somebody than giving them 3 words and an exclamation mark. It's far better for them. They learn rather than feel attacked. But I think the reality of it is, people can't keep on going, this is the science, this is the truth, this is this. It's not. It's train, like we say, train the dog in front of you. And what you just mentioned then, when you said, oh, I don't know if any of the owners have done this before. Our other line, I suppose, is train the dog in front of you, and every dog is different. And
Yeah.
it's that line that needs to not be a marketing slogan as well, isn't it? Look, train this dog, but understand this dog's journey will not be the same as any other dog's journey.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. 100%.
We managed to like solve dog training problems with just a few lines of be kind, and no, they're all different. The end. Like we could literally go out there now and solve the whole world's problem with those, but it is the same thing, isn't it? It's like you
Yeah.
just gotta use some logic around it. If your dog is causing issues, and for most people they're causing issues in the home or causing issues when they're out on thing, you've got to find a way of getting through to the dog. We can't continue our relationship in this situation. Again, let's put it into human terms. If every time you went out on a date with somebody, they threw a pint over you, in the end, you just wouldn't go on the date. Like, it's just, and that's what happens. People stop taking their dogs out or get rid of the dog, or the whole house falls apart around that dog. And we laugh and joke, but the reality is that they've massively, and me and you don't take this for granted at all. They're massive problems that if we can fix, would make that person, that family, that dog's life so much better.
Yeah, 100%.
I do feel we just put the world to rights there, Claire. For those of you who are still with us at the end of that, you are our right people. You know where we are. Come join our membership because you are thinking the way we think. Thank you, Claire, for another amazing podcast. We will be back with you in a fortnight's time for our next podcast episode. We hope you've enjoyed. We love hearing your feedback. So genuinely send us some comments, DMs, whatever you need to, and we'll chat to you because we are also very open to having the conversation. If somebody said, I've been taught this, we're never going to tell you wrong or that it's bad or any of that stuff. We're always going to say to you, have you thought about that? Or have you thought about that? Or yes, I've learned so much where people have sent me a message and they've said something and I'm like, I never knew that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that additional layer of understanding myself. And I know you're exactly the same, Claire. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoy. We look forward to your feedback and we shall see you all in a fortnight's time for another episode of Found It, Fetched It.